Pretty good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Just give people a couple minutes.
Gina, are you following me?
Give people like a couple more minutes to join us here. Thanks for being here, everybody. Very excited about our topic today and our guest.
I'm gonna be on a call, so I'm gonna close the door, okay?
Okay, great.
All right, let's go ahead and get started, and people can join as they join. Kelly, if you can help me watch the door, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Thanks everyone for being here. We're continuing our conversation from last week, Lost and Found Pets. Today we have Tom joining us. And Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I thought it's going to come later in the conversation. Hi, everyone. My name is Tom. I'm at my final year at university. I study data science and philosophy at Minerva, originally from Israel. I guess that's an introduction. I don't know how long should it be? Should I? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So Tom, do you want to just dive in with your presentation and then we can ask questions? Tom's been doing some amazing work that we wanted to share with everybody and get your thoughts and feedback and dig into what he's been working on. So Tom, I think you should be able to share your screen.
Great. Before I share my screen in a second, I'll give some context maybe. Continue the introduction. So the sort of the tool I'm gonna show you and ask you about is a result of a data analysis project that I did with Dallas Animal Services, the shelter in Dallas, over the summer and sort of into the past few months. I mean, I could later maybe cut into like how I even got to shelter data in the first place, but somehow I did it, and the sort of the questions that I got to dig into were born out of sort of ongoing collaboration and back and forth, where they would, I saw the data, I raised some ideas for what sort of analysis I can do. I did some stuff. They looked at it, gave me some feedback, and then went back and forth until we arrived at some product, most of which revolves around strays and RTOs, and what are some nicer ways to look at the shelter's data that relates to these issues. And as I was having more conversations with shelters over time, I realized that it's very possible that many other shelters might have similar interests in exploring the same sorts of data, and that also collect very similar data. So everything I used here is the sort of intake, or like the found locations of stray dogs and their owner addresses in cases of RTOs. And if it wasn't RTOs, then sort of what was the outcome address, and that's it. Just these 2 locations, and like on a zip code sort of level. Since many shelters have sort of the same data, I thought that it might be interesting to take what I made for them, which was sort of living in this like static report with visualization sort of thing, and then build a sort of an interactive tool out of it, which is what I'm going to share with you now. So now let me try and share my screen. What I'm going to show you is actually with the data from the Animal Foundation in Las Vegas, just because that's sort of the latest one I've been working on, so it's the most up to date. But it's living online in the internet, so you can even go in and have a look at it. Or even better, if you want to sort of set some time to have like a deeper dive, then I'm happy to do that. I'm going to try to go over this quickly now, and then you can ask some questions. But I will be really happy. Like, this is really sort of a prototype, so first, excuse me for like, you know, any sort of design issues, or like it's not the prettiest or anything, but I'm going to try to explain sort of what sort of data is here. And please sort of write down if you have any sort of questions or suggestions, or like think if this was your shelter's data, like what might be interesting to see here, or what sort of questions might be interesting to answer with. All of this is sort of in a work in progress, and I'm happy to sort of think of what other things can be visualized here. So yeah, I will go quickly, and then maybe you can ask some questions. So this is sort of an intro page, just so that anyone who goes into this can understand everything without me being here and explaining. So it just explains what each page does, and I'll go now over the pages quickly. So this is sort of an overview page before diving into strays and RTO specifically, just to see sort of the intakes and outcomes for the shelter. And the data I've been working with there was for 1 year, for the calendar year of 2019. And this sort of date filtering here works for the entire app. So I can change things here if I want, and then everything sort of updates dynamically. So you can kind of see, you can choose a certain month or a certain period of time, and then see those things change, and then reset as you want. And this sort of maintains to the other pages. So this is like a very light intro, but then the sort of more interesting stuff happen here. So this sort of figure, I'm going to ignore these texts. These texts are just explaining what I'm going to say. So this figure starts by looking at each zip code and finding the horizontal axis here is the number of strays that were found in that zip code, and the vertical axis is the RTO rate there, which is the RTO. I calculated as just the number of RTOs out of the number of strays in that zip code. And then the labels here just help sort of see the higher intake one. So this is like a helpful figure to see sort of the trend, which is interestingly here, for example, pretty opposite of what's happening in Dallas, just as one example, where the higher intake ones have to have lower and lower RTOs, which might suggest what are some areas that are interesting to focus on. And then since this is all sort of like driven by geography, then like a nicer way to look at it is like on a map, I think. So here's sort of like a dynamic map that here, in this case, Las Vegas, but with whatever shelter, it's going to be centered around the shelter. And you can sort of scroll around and check each zip code and how many strays were in it. And then this is sort of the first view. And the second view looks at the sort of other piece of data there, which is the RTO rate. So you can see what is the RTO rate and then how many dogs out of how many, because rate can be sort of misleading if you just see it just like this. Like this is a very high rate, but only 11 dogs. So that's sort of another way of seeing what's happening here. This is slightly less interesting, so I'm gonna skip that for like our short overview now and move on to the second sort of type of data that lives here right now, which is the distances that each dog that was found has traveled, which I just sort of calculate by finding the found location and the owner location, and then imagine just sort of like doing a Google Maps search of walking distance between these 2 points, but just like for the entire data. And then plot so each result now, each unit here is a dog that has like a distance in miles that have gone from where they were found to their owner address. So you can see that how this works overall. And sort of again examine what's the distribution of things. So as expected, most dogs travel very near their home. So if you want to sort of look at a certain number and see how many dogs have traveled by this distance, then this is what this little thing does. And this figure as well is sort of dynamic, so you can zoom in. And if you're maybe very interested in what happens sort of very close to home, then you can also see how this is distributed. So this is the right-hand feature. And then the left side, again, because this is sort of like driven geographically, then there are some things that I thought would be interesting to look at a map. So one thing is to take all these distances and look at how they map per zip code. So for dogs who were found at zip code X, what is the... Oh, I think there is some background. Okay. So for dogs who have been found in a particular zip code, what's the sort of median distance that they have gone away from home? So this sort of allows to see that there are some areas where stray dogs have gone further from home than others. And then you can sort of dig in a little bit into that. Like a lot of this sort of provokes, I think can provoke different follow-up questions or like sort of insights that we can further look into. But that's sort of one type of the second type of data that lives here. And the final type of data here relates to length of stay, which doesn't only relate to strays and RTOs now, because we thought that one might be interesting to sort of see how these groups compare to one another. So this starts very far here because there is one sort of very big outlier, but we can sort of scroll these and like zoom in a little bit and see what's going on. So this basically shows the length of stays for each for stray dogs and for a particular outcome of choice. So now it looks at RTOs, but if we're interested in comparing it to adoptions, then we can move to adoptions and transfers, etc. So this is how this thing goes. And then kind of similarly, you get the trick by now, but there is a map here that sort of groups things geographically. So one statistics that we thought was interesting to look at with length of stays is whether dogs whose owners live in a particular zip code have a similar or different RTO rates. So whether, for example, this sort of one hypothesis was whether owners who live further away from the shelter might have a harder sort of time or take longer to come and pick up their dogs, for example. So they wanted to see whether the length of stay might be different or similar between different areas. So this is what this first layer gets at. And then this second and final one, which I'm going to present now, and then kind of stop and see where we're at and whether this was not too confusing, was to look at so now if we're not talking about RTOs and talk about the strays who were adopted or fostered, so this I was trying to get at which sort of areas have adoptions or fosters of dogs who are like sort of the long stayers, which we defined as like dogs who stayed over 14 days. So for each zip code here, it looks at the total number of adoptions or fosters into that zip code, and then took that, and that was sort of the bottom, and then out of those, how many of those were dogs who were long stayers, so like 14 days or more. So you can sort of spot which areas had adopted more sort of these long stayers, and then you can sort of go back and correlate that with sort of the different sort of adoption stations or activities that have been done in these areas, and again, sort of do sort of follow-up investigations. But this is sort of the type of question that this gets at. So I think I'm gonna stop here. I hope that I didn't speak too quickly, or that was kind of okay and not too much to take in. And again, would love to hear any thoughts or feedbacks or questions, or like, what the hell was this? Any response is definitely fair.
Yeah, and we also have Jordan. I believe Jordan is on the call from Dallas. Here, Jordan is joining us now. Which is one of the shelters that you worked with on this project.
Yes, primarily.
So maybe we could get Jordan to, looking for Jordan. I think Jordan's here now.
I just got in, yeah.
Hi, Jordan. Do you want to give any information about sort of what you found super interesting about working with Tom?
I mean, I love getting the deep dive into our data. I think we all have assumptions about what is happening and what trends might be happening, but having that real evaluation to support what we think is happening, and also to kind of show where we can put more efforts. So it helps us strategize, and also knows that we can make that front end, those day 1 and day 2, much more robust, because every day counts.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jordan. And thank you, Tom. It's really an amazing, impressive tool. And I love that it only takes a couple of data points. What other questions do people have about this? And I guess my question for the group is, would a tool like this be useful for your staff and the programs that you're currently building? And Chris asked, was it used for field RTOs too?
Yeah, so it was, and we could sort of be dynamic about where do we count them and where we don't. So for the length of stay calculations, for example, for RTOs, I excluded them because that would sort of skew everything pretty heavily towards no length of stay. But yeah, in principle, yes.
And Chris, we started with just field RTOs,
right.
And then we realized that we needed to look at the bigger picture because yeah, we've learned something here, but what other steps can we take if we don't win the field RTO? What else can we do?
And Chris,
got it. Sorry, I joined
yeah,
late from the other group, so so I wasn't sure if I missed something at the beginning. Thanks.
Would it be useful to be able to sort of, and I'm not sure if this is something that's built in currently, Tom, but would it be useful to be able to sort of like pull those two things out from one another?
What do you mean by two things?
The in the field and then animals that came to the shelter.
Oh, yeah, very possible. Again, the premise here, I think, or what I am trying to get at and see where their interest for is, like these are sort of the basic, like I guess good starting points to start looking into different types of data. But if there's like these sub questions or like sort of differences that the particular shelter might be interested in looking at one thing and not the other and sort of do another sort of division, then it's very doable to sort of build that on top of what's already there. So yeah, these are the kind of things that I would like to understand better.
Other questions for Tom? Jordan, I'm gonna keep picking on you. Like when you think about the data points that did help you the most, like what were they? What was surprising looking at this?
I think the most shocking to me was the absolutely how close they were to their homes. Like we know they don't go far, but when you realize that they're literally coming from the same block, like that's not just not far, they're in their yard. Like they're there, the dogs. And the other thing that was kind of interesting is that we found in our highest intake areas, which happened to be some of our lower income residential areas, we saw the animals went less distance than actually in our areas with maybe more money. And that was interesting to us. So it's just that you have to kind of maybe strategize and look at things a little bit differently. If the neighborhood is a lot bigger and the houses are far apart, you may be able to tell that owner, you might need to look a little bit further. Whereas the others, it's like, hey, it's probably on your block, like knock on all the doors on your street. Any of these people might have it. They're not really going that far, and really kind of giving them the right guidance. Another thing, again, we changed our ordinances having to do with stray hold a couple of years ago. And this data really reaffirms that we used to have to hold animals for 10 days if they came in with a microchip. And I am one of the biggest supporters of RTO, but holding an animal for 10 days, like that just means other animals are going to lose their lives. So knowing that on day 1, day 2, that's when the animals are going home truly, that means something to us. Another thing that I found interesting, we were worried that there might be barriers in certain parts of our community for people getting animals back, and we didn't find that. It was equal across the entire city. People are coming to reclaim their pets.
Interesting. We also have a couple of other people on the call from the Lost and Found Working Group and from KC Pet Project and from Chico. So do you all want to sort of introduce yourselves as well?
I am not in the Lost and Found working group, but I think I'm the only one from Casey Pet Project on this call.
Yes.
I am Tori Bugate, and I am with Casey Pet Project. I do the marketing for Casey Pet Project and assist a lot with Lost and Found here at the shelter. So
Thanks, Tori. And Tracy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tracy. I'm from the City of Chico Animal Shelter. I'm the Animal Services Manager.
Excellent. And then who on the call is in the Lost and Found group? I know Gina is. Hi, Gina.
Faith raised her hand.
I'm the reporting lead for the Lost and Found group. Bobby and Gina are the leads.
Excellent. And
Some of our members are Leslie Poole. I'm trying to see who's on here that's also a member.
Leslie's on here as well. So Tori, I know you have to hop off a little bit early. So did you want to cover quickly your what you've been sort of working on to improve your Lost and Found programs? And I think all of these things sort of tie into what Tom has created here. And if we can sort of think about the programs that you all are developing and how this data might sort of help inform those programs and also like vice versa, I think we can get somewhere here.
Yeah, so at Casey Pet Project, we have always just done the animal sheltering side of things. And sorry if you're in the Marcom group, you keep hearing me talk about this, but we're getting ready to take on the animal control contract for the city of Kansas City, Missouri. So we are expanding a lot of what we're doing here for Lost and Found. And we started this really because of COVID and saying, no, don't bring us lost pets because we don't know what's going to happen. So we wanted to give our community a lot more resources, which we're still actively developing. So I'll put our Lost and Found pages like in the chat, but some things that we've done is just providing a lot more resources for people, being able to submit Lost and Found pet reports. And we have a Lost and Found coordinator who just gets all of those. We have a very unique situation in that, I mean, it's not really that unique, but we don't have a centralized Lost and Found page here in Kansas City. We have like 43 Lost and Found Facebook pages. So people, if they lose a pet or if they're trying to get a pet back home, they have no idea where all the posts. There's so many options. They all sound exactly the same in their titles. We have our own Lost and Found Facebook page. There's tons of others. So we're trying to figure out how to centralize that message and get more lost pets back home. So something that our animal services officers are already doing, we officially start our contract on the 23rd, but they are taking flyers into neighborhoods where there were pets that were found and going door to door with the flyers, and they're in English and Spanish, and asking people if they have seen these pets that are in our shelter that didn't come in with a microchip or anything. And what we're finding is that, you know, a lot of them, like Jordan said, are really close to their home. And at the same time that they're going and talking to people in these communities about lost pets, they're also getting to know these residents, getting to know their pets. So actually on our very first call out, we talked to this man and talked to him about his dog. His dog had a big tumor on the side, and he was like, I really want to get help for my dog. And like a week later, that dog ended up at our shelter as a stray. And our animal services officer saw the dog and said, I know who this dog belongs to. Got in touch with the owner. We worked with our vet clinic, got the tumor taken care of. They did surgery and removed the tumor, got him all this flea and tick medication, got his vaccinations up to date, and took the dog back home to the man so that he could have his dog back. And that was just on our very first call out. So we are not on Nextdoor yet in Kansas City. We're working on getting on there, but in the meantime, we've started to develop a community captains program where we're asking volunteers that live in these neighborhoods to post lost pets on their neighborhood pages. That has been a very slow go to get that up and running, but we're trying very, very hard at the same time trying to get on Nextdoor. Our city's just, we're a nonprofit organization that runs a city shelter, so the city's a little hesitant about letting us have access on Nextdoor, unfortunately. trying to think of what else, but it's just providing a lot of information on our website, showing all of our lost and found pets. We're actively trying to figure out how to increase our RTO rate, which is usually just like 10%. It's not a significant amount of time, but we're really trying to track that data. And we are seeing the same thing, that anytime a pet is reclaimed that was found, it's usually found within 1/10 of a mile from their house is what we're finding. And even if they have a microchip, what was it? We have like a video that we did that showed in May, I think we had 31 pets that came in with microchips, and only like 9 of them had any information that was usable on it. So it's just educating a lot of people about, if you have a microchip, make sure it's current, because if it's not, it's no use of us to be able to get that pet back home.
Awesome. Faith, do you want to say what you said in the chat?
Yeah.
Sure. Tori, you had sent me an email about this issue of the 43 different lost and found, and I took that to our lost and found work group, and Gina and Bobby and everybody were super supportive of wanting to eliminate all of these duplicate ones in all the communities. So we're actually working with industry engagement and lost and found on creating a Facebook page that will include all of the local Facebook admins of the different lost and found groups, and try to get everybody into one group where we can talk about why it's counterproductive to have 43 different lost and found groups to have to go look at, and try to kind of streamline that activity so people are not struggling with links of all the different places to go try to look, and then they give up, or they don't continue to look back every day at all 43 of them, and that kind of thing. So we did take your feedback to heart, and we are definitely coming up with a way to help you out for that.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Of course.
And then the other question about like friendly finders. Unfortunately, we don't have a program like that here yet. We've done it with some kittens and things like that, but we just haven't been able to get it up and running yet due to a few hurdles, but hopefully in the future we'll be able to get there. But we are encouraging people, so the other thing we're doing is setting up a new pet support call center, and saying, if you have any questions about anything related to animals, call this number first. Don't bring the pet to the shelter, call this number first. And if you have kittens under your porch, or if you found a stray dog, call this number. We're gonna give you all the tools you need to try to get that pet back home. If you can't find the owner or anything like that, you need us to come, an animal services officer to come get it, we can do that then, or the officers can take over trying to find the pet owner out in the field. But that call center is going to be up and running in about a week. And so that's very exciting.
Excellent. And Tracy, what's going on in Chico? What are you all working on in Chico for this issue?
Well, we have actually a pretty high RTO rate for dogs. About 60 to 70% of our stray dogs go home. But we always continue to try to raise the bar. So when COVID hit, we were really concerned we were going to get flooded with animals and calls for strays. And actually what happened is it got really quiet. And we think because people were home, pets were either not wandering, or people were finding them and getting them back home on their own. But one of the things we've always had is a lot lost and found logs at the shelter. So in our lobby, and of course our lobby was closed because of COVID. So we had to come up with a new way of people being able to report lost and found pets. So we found a program, it's web-based, it's called Airtable, if you guys are familiar with that. And we set up forms and put them on our website so people can actually in real time fill out a lost dog report, fill out a found cat report, and it posts to our website. So there's one place for people to go for the information. They can attach a picture to it. So it's been really helpful, even just for animals that come in and somebody posts a lost dog, so we can say, oh, look, there's the owner. And just, it actually helps with, people in the community being able to reconnect pets, because now they're seeing a pet on the lost and found page that maybe somebody has reported lost and they found it, and then they can just connect with them directly. So they don't have to go to Facebook. They don't have to scroll through a million Facebook groups. Like we have the same problem where we've got so many different lost and found pet Facebook pages. And then we've had 2 pretty significant fires. And then of course, though there's like a million people decide they're going to help and they're going to post, you know, they're going to create a Facebook page for lost pets from the fire. And so there's so many places for people to look. So we just centralized it on our own website so people can go to our website. They don't have to join Facebook or, you know, deal with comments and things like that. So that's one of the things that really came out of COVID for us, was to do this online lost and found board for people. And then before COVID started, we actually started to do more return in field. So our officers have chip scanners. They scan the animals. They have access to our shelter database plus the microchip lookup in their trucks. So they're able to figure out, oh, you know, this pet's 2 doors down from its home, and they can contact the owner and hopefully get them home. So we're doing a lot more return in field, which has been, it's been great. And in fact, one of our animal control officers actually got flowers from one of the pet owners. How often does that happen, right? Usually the animal control is the bad guy, right? So here there's a bouquet of flowers shows up at the shelter from a pet owner that was so grateful that the animal control officer brought the animal home and not brought it to the shelter. So, you know, that's really helping just with, you know, overall community, you know, getting support from the community, but also just creating good relationships and creating a positive image. And we're part of the police department. So of course, you know, the police have kind of struggled a little bit with, you know, identity and, you know, perception. And so being part of the police department and having that positive face to the police department has really helped a lot. So, you know, those are kind of the big things that we're doing right now. And then we are developing a finder foster program as well, where the animal control officers can, if somebody finds an animal and they want to hold on to it, the animal control officer can go out, scan it, see if we can find the owner right away if there's a chip, and if not, photograph it, and we'll put it on our website. And then, you know, once the hold period's over, then they can contact us, and then we can help them with spay, neuter, and anything else that the animal needs if they decide to keep it. So that's kind of what we're up to.
So Tracy, with the Airtable, this is all amazing. With the, so I guess my first question is, how much did your RTO rate increase with COVID?
You know, we're not tracking in the field, so our RTO rate really hasn't changed significantly. We've always had a really high RTO rate for dogs.
Got it.
Cats run about 7 to 10% of cats go home, but we only accept sick or injured cats and orphan kittens. So, you know, our RTO rate for cats is not super high. We don't take in a lot of strays.
And with this Airtable, how are people finding out about that information? And I think Airtable is really, it's really easy to just sort of like copy from one Airtable and use that as a template.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would be willing to share with our Lost and Found group? Because I think that would be incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're just, when people call us and say, I found a dog or I've lost a pet, you can actually create a form, and that goes on our website. So we just direct them to, we have 2 tabs on our website. One's found a pet and the other one's lost a pet. And so depending upon, you know, what the situation is, we'll direct them to that tab, because it has a lot of information on it on what to do if you found a pet or if you've lost a pet. But then there are actual buttons, and you click on that button, it goes to the form, they fill the form out online. That auto populates the Airtable, which then automatically puts it on our website, because it's all connected, and they can upload a photograph. So what's really nice is it's set up like, it's basically like little tiles. and you can see all the animals that people have put up on those boards. So we have one for found dogs, one for lost dogs, one for found cats, and so on. And so it's separated by sex, and it's sorted by date. So the most recent ones are at the top, and then it's separated by male, female, spayed, neutered, unknown. So if you find a pet and you're not really sure if it's a male or female, you can put it in that unknown category. So then people can just go on there and just scroll through and, see if there are pets on there, or, if, they can also check if they found a pet, if somebody's got a pet posted. And we use it too. Our staff uses it all the time. And we've gotten animals back home because we go through our lost and found and we're like, oh yeah, that dog just came in, or, oh yeah, somebody just reported this dog missing, or, so, it's a great tool, not just for the public, but for the staff as well. And the great thing is, it's one thing to take a paper report and take down the description, but how many people actually know how to describe a cat color? How many, they say, my cat's black and brown. What does that mean, right? So it's really a tabby, but having that photograph is so important. So, putting that photograph up there is really kind of a game changer versus just paper logs in a binder that people scroll through and say, well, I don't know, is this a match or not?
Yeah, and it sort of solves for the question that's in the chat about how do we track people who have found pets and gotten them back home? Because I imagine you can track that fairly easily when all of the information is living in this one place, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Sharon asked a question, in marketing these services, do you use 211 as well? And I'm curious about that question for Casey Pet Project too, and actually for everybody.
I don't know what 211.org is. So no.
Yeah, I don't either.
We don't use 211.
Sharon, did you want to add anything to that?
I was going to ask Lisa Ward, who's on the call, right?
You're going to hit me up after that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to explain it because you can say it very succinctly.
Okay, let me put my audio here. So 211.org, you can put it in and then put in your zip code, and it will show you all the services for people. So, and it's usually for people using social services or anything along those lines. So the beauty of 211.org, it's been around forever. It is, I think, pretty much nationwide. So where I live here in this area, if homeless people or people in need wanted to access 211.org, the next closest location would be up in Walnut Creek, which is about 10 miles away from us. But it usually posts like when events are happening. You can always go there, and if you were looking to do any grooming, if you needed some health services, food vouchers, anything along those lines, they would be made available. It would be nice if there was also then that spot for my pet to be taken care of, or maybe just be able to pick up some sort of package for my pet. But these are very, social services is very aware of 211.org, and it's been around for quite some time. So anytime you can partner with them or, be a part of that, that's really just an amazing thing. It's meeting people where they are.
So when someone has either lost their home or has to move for whatever reason, or is in transit, if all the services that they're looking for, and oh, there's services for my pet, or if I've lost my pet because I moved, here's another linkage to go back to your website, or to go back to finding how do I find my pet, or else they may just give up because they wouldn't think of the shelter. Yeah. Because they're looking at all their other services that they need for their family.
That's such a good point. And I've seen cities recently use it as sort of like the starting place. So you can call that number, and then whoever answers that phone. Now there are some places where it's sort of like one nonprofit is kind of managing that in different places so that they know all of the beds that are available. They know all of the places that have a certain type of, you know, medication available and things like this.
Yeah, some of this is about connecting. So I'm reading some of the comments, and this is part of, they don't know what they don't know, and we're not sure what we don't know. And it's, yes, and Gina's giving a little history background. I love that. It does fall into United Way. The other little piece of things, and I'm just speaking from the school side, every school district has what we call lists of people that are free and reduced sort of lunch and in need. There's qualifications that go into that, and then kids in our country will receive free and reduced benefits of all sorts. There are always social service agencies that work with that, but just to be able to give them one sort of information, if you happen to see when you go into a home that a family does have a pet, there might be a card for a resource that they can reach out to you and provide. You can provide food and health services or wherever to that animal, whatever you think might be appropriate that you can offer. But that's how reaching people who you might not know or need or might want to connect with something. Every school district has to do that. So there is a resource there.
So interesting. So since we have the attention and ears of people from the Lost and Found Working Group, and we've heard about a couple of, not even a couple, many different solutions, which of these sort of like, if we envision like a toolkit for the element of Lost and Found, what is missing? What do you want in there? Like, what are you most excited about, and what are your organization sort of really needing right now, both short-term and long-term? I saw someone needed a coordinator job description, for example. Things like that are really useful for us to know about, and then we can kind of work on them.
I think it's also really important not to just create a coordinator, but make it actionable. I know when I joined Dallas, we had a coordinator already over Lost and Found, which I was really excited about. And then when I found out what they were doing with their day, it wasn't leading to actual RTOs. They were that neighborhood call center that people could call and feel really good about reporting Lost and Found pets to, but he wasn't actually connecting animals to their owners, and our RTO rate in the shelter was really low. So it's really, making sure that it is connecting those people and those pets, and that the programs are targeted. So I think we got to caution people on that.
I think one of my biggest fears with Lost and Found is sort of like the Facebook group conundrum of having so many resources. Like, some of my biggest fears with Lost and Found is that there's so many programs and so many tools, and it's like, how do we condense it so that it's easy for everybody to understand? If you've lost a pet, here are the options for you. Sometimes I think it can get a little confusing. We have 2 states to deal with here, so the dog can wander across the street and it goes to a shelter in Kansas. So it's like, how do we condense it all so it's really easy for the public to understand?
No other questions today. Quiet day.
I don't have any questions, Rory, but I have bad hair because I volunteered at the animal shelter today and I got sweaty in the snow. I guess the Lost and Found Working Group is trying to produce a couple of different things, like a template that kind of shows you everything that should be on your I found a pet page, I lost a pet page. And yes, there is this conversation of trying to find a way to encourage the Lost and Found groups to not just consolidate necessarily, but so that they communicate better. And I think before all of that gets done, it would behoove us to reach out to those admins and develop relationships, which oftentimes are adversarial, and they shouldn't be, because we're all trying to do the same thing. I mean, do all of you know how many Lost and Found pages exist in your local areas? No?
I don't know the exact number. I know it's probably 5 to 10, and then the next doors are really popular, like not just Facebook pages, but there's local next doors, and that's where we've been trying to connect, is with the next door leaders.
Yeah. I just started volunteering at this tiny little shelter in Emmett, Idaho, and my hair blows back when I find out they don't even post their strays on their website. And how many organizations in the United States are like this? I mean, we're the progressive ones, right? Because we wouldn't be on here if we weren't. So how do we reach out to all of those other shelters, especially the rural ones that are missing out on all these conversations? That's something else that I would encourage you to do. Who are your partners? Who's being left out? How do we bring them along?
And Sharon asked a great question. How would someone go about finding all of the pages on Facebook? What does that process look like if you don't know? Do you just look on Facebook?
I just did it today for our area, and type in lost and found in whatever city you're in, and they all start populating, or county that you're in. That's how I started it.
That's what I do too, because Austin actually has several competing ones now.
And imagine how useful they would be to us if we did develop relationships and could encourage them, cross post. There are some that are doing amazing jobs at literally checking the shelters lost and found to the things that are posted on these pages. So we have to figure out how to make them allies and put their volunteer spirit to good use. Something I haven't heard mentioned on this call is using volunteers to do cross-checking, to scour Craigslist postings for lost or found pets. There's a lot of volunteers that want to help, and that's the kind of work that can be done at home too.
Such a good idea.
One of the things that I'm sorry.
Please, go ahead.
I look like I'm in the witness protection program. Sorry about the bright light. So I'm with Pet FBI, which is Pets Found by Internet, and we do have a national database of lost and found pets. And one of the things that we encourage the Facebook groups to do in our area is, instead of sharing just the information, to share the link back to the post in our database. That way it's always current. And so as soon as that pet is found and that report is updated, they have updated information, and somebody's personal information isn't floating around Facebook for forever. So if you can get some kind of centralized, whether it's Pet FBI or Finding Rover or whatever tool you're using, if they can post the links back to the actual report versus keep creating a new post all the time, it's easier to keep track of who's home and who's still missing.
And with the comments about like places being adversarial, like some of these groups and things being adversarial, I wonder if Leslie's solution here is maybe a place to start with some of these groups that don't necessarily want to work directly with shelters. Do you have any thoughts about that, Leslie?
Yeah, I found that the groups really will have ownership in what they're doing, and they really want to continue. Getting them to give up a page is probably difficult, but if we can get them to share the same message, share the same report, point back to the same shelter lost and found page, if we can just get them all to share the same information, I think that's going to be the critical piece. And some of them, I know in our area, some of them really do have adversarial relationships with the shelters. So I think Haas coming at it and creating this kind of Facebook group where all the admins can come together is a good idea. But I think it's just about getting them consistent messaging that they're handing out to people.
Well, I know, I mean, like what you're saying, Leslie, even in Austin, it's not necessarily just adversarial relationship with the shelters, but also competing with each other Facebook pages. We've had a really ugly split off with some of our lost and found admins, and they've kicked other people off, and then they've gone on and created another page. And so it's, how do we get all of them to overcome their own personal animosities with each other for the one purpose that they're supposed to be serving?
Yeah, I agree, Faith. We've had the same thing happen where it's just about getting the win. Like they want to find that pet first and take the credit. It's really, it can be really silly. But yeah, I think exactly. We have to get them to just all work together. We're all on the same team. We all have the same mission. we need to get them to work together.
I actually have a question. Do you guys have, or, and I don't know, but our Facebook groups tend to put out this idea that if somebody finds an animal and posts it on Facebook and they keep it for 30 days, that, you know, hold on to it for 30 days, then they get to keep it. Do you guys deal with that at all?
Yes, definitely. It varies state to state, as well as what property laws are and how states deem animals. Obviously, like farm animals are deemed property, I think, in almost every single state. And then domestic animals, it's different state to state to state. I know in Austin, they were saying they would be more comfortable with it being 90 days before they could consider owned animals, that they owned it. But yeah, it's definitely happening. Some of them it's 14 days, some of them are 7 days. Some of them, if you fed them for more than 72 hours and cared and gave them a place to reside, then you could either keep it or rehome it yourself too. So it just varies everywhere.
Are there any reporting requirements like that they have to notify local animal control? Because the Facebook just sort of perpetuates this idea that, well, if you just post it on Facebook, then you've done your due diligence and that's okay.
Again, that varies. A lot of them are done by ordinance. So Las Cruces, Mexico, specifically, I work with them and I know their ordinance in and out. One piece of it does say that they are required to file a lost and found report, and they can post it at the shelter, and then they only have to hold the animal for 72 hours before they can rehome it or own it. And then it says that they also have to allow the animal to be the shelter, I guess, basically like animal control, to come pick up the animal if an owner comes forward. They have to allow that within the 72 hours. El Paso has something similar. It's not 72 hours, but they have something similar that they need to file the lost and found report, and then they can hang on to it in their home, and they have to hang on to it for 14 days. And then at 14th day, a decision's made through the shelter and the finder on what we do. Do we go back for 14 more? You know, what goes on from there?
We have some challenges here in Ontario. The provincial legislation states that pound facilities have to keep the animal for 72 hours before they can then find another home for it. In Brampton, where I work, we have a particular rescue group who's always on Facebook picking up lost pets, and they just keep them. They refuse to report to us. They refuse to give pets back. We've had a case recently where we had to involve the local police service because they had a cat that the gentleman identified the very next day was his cat, and they essentially refused to give it back to him. So that's been a challenge for us. And you know, we've talked at the shelter about what avenues are available to us as far as trying to get them on board, and going the route of, you know, some sort of enforcement. We have limited options to that, but we really feel like that would just set us up for significant failure in the eyes of the community. And we've tried inviting them to the shelter to talk to us, and we've given a tour to one of their core group of volunteers, but the person who's the founder and who runs the rescue really is vehemently opposed to the animal shelter and is not interested in participating in any of these suggestions. So I was on a call last week, I think, with Gina Knapp, and Gina said, in specifically respect to this situation, why don't we put their Facebook page on our website as a lost and found resource? You know, sort of backdooring them, but making it very public that if you've lost your pet, you need to connect with these people. And that's what we're going to do.
Other struggles or anything anybody wants to share? All right. Tom, before we leave, do you want to put your contact information or some way for people to sort of explore what you shared and how to get in touch with you if people are interested?
Yeah, I'm happy to put that. I'll paste that in the chat. And as I was saying, I don't know, it might have been sort of a lot to take in when I was trying to fly through it. but I'm very happy for people to both take a look at it on their own, or to set up a time and sort of think through either what's already there, or maybe there's something that isn't there, but it might be interesting to put on a map and see how it looks like. And it's very doable with the sort of template I put that to sort of substitute other data into it and have a look. So if you're curious and want to play around with it, then feel free to send me an email. And I'm happy to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for joining today. Next week, we're going to have a couple of members from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee for the Haas Project to talk about what we're up to, but also to just start gathering some information about what resources might be helpful to share with all of you. So please tune in next week. I'm really, really excited about this topic. And, you know, we can talk about recruiting board members, everything from that to starting a DEI advisory committee within your own organization, and the plans that we have for that advisory committee over the next year. So that will be exciting. Anyone want to share any other announcements or anything with the group before we close out? People are just exhausted today, maybe. Weather changes. I don't know.
It's Remembrance Day here in Ontario, so there were lots of services this morning.
Got it. Got it. Well, it's always wonderful to see you all. This really, truly is a highlight of my week. So thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait to see you all next week.